The great chamber of the Galactic Council stretched upward like the inside of a massive shell. Light from three distant suns filtered through crystal windows and cast long shadows across the polished floor. Representatives from 12 species sat in their designated sections, each group separated by invisible barriers of ancient rivalry and careful diplomacy. The air carried the mixed scents of a dozen different worlds, filtered and balanced by machines that had worked for 10,000 years. Commander Vethorak stood at the center of the speaking platform and felt very small. He was old now. His scales had lost their shine decades ago, and the scars that covered his body told stories that most beings would never want to hear. 40 years he had served the Kithrani military. 17 major conflicts had left their marks on his flesh and his mind. He had watched friends die on worlds whose names he could barely remember. He had killed enemies who probably had families waiting for them somewhere among the stars. None of that had prepared him for what he needed to say today. High Counselor Mevith looked down from his elevated seat with the patient expression of someone who had heard too many requests and complaints to count. His pale blue skin seemed to glow in the filtered light, and his four eyes blinked in a pattern that suggested mild boredom. "Commander Vethorak of the Kithrani Defense Force," Mevith said, his voice carrying easily through the chamber's perfect acoustics. "You have requested an emergency audience with this council. We have granted your request out of respect for your years of service. Please state your purpose." Vethorak took a deep breath. The air tasted strange here, too clean and too controlled. He missed the honest smell of battlefield smoke and ship fuel. "Honored counselors," he began. "3 years ago, I commanded a long-range scouting mission to the Outer Spiral Arm. Our orders were to catalog potentially habitable worlds and assess any developing civilizations we might encounter." A few of the representatives shifted in their seats. Long-range scouting missions were common enough, and the reports they generated usually contained nothing more exciting than mineral surveys and atmospheric readings. "During this mission, we discovered a world called Earth." The name meant nothing to most of those present. One or two of the younger aides checked their data tablets, searching for information. "Earth is a small world," Vethorak continued, "mostly water, with a single large moon. The dominant species calls themselves humans. They have achieved basic spaceflight, but have not yet developed faster-than-light travel. By our standards, they are primitive." Counselor Thress of the Vorn Collective made a dismissive gesture with two of her forearms. "Commander, if you have come to report the discovery of another primitive species, I must tell you that such matters are handled by the Survey Bureau. This council deals with threats to galactic security, not catalog entries." "That is precisely why I am here, Counselor." Vethorak's voice hardened. "I believe humans represent a significant threat to galactic security." Silence fell over the chamber. Then slowly, laughter began to spread. It started with the Vrithani delegation and moved outward like ripples in a pond. Even some of the more serious species allowed themselves expressions of amusement. High Counselor Mevith raised a hand for quiet. "Commander, please explain how a species that cannot even leave their own star system poses a threat to civilizations that have traveled between worlds for millennia." Vethorak had expected this response. He had prepared for it, but hearing the laughter still burned in his chest like acid. "During our observation of Earth, we witnessed one of their regional conflicts, a war between two of their nation-states." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "What I saw there changed everything I thought I knew about combat. Wars between primitive nations are hardly unusual," said Representative Cole of the Meridian Syndicate. "Most species go through a violent phase before achieving enlightenment. What makes these humans different?" "Everything," Vethorak said. "Everything makes them different." He activated the holographic display built into the speaking platform. Images appeared in the air above him, recorded from orbit 3 years ago. The council members leaned forward slightly, their interest caught despite their skepticism. The images showed a burned and broken landscape. Buildings had been reduced to rubble. Vehicles lay scattered like the toys of careless children. And among the destruction, small figures moved with purpose and determination. "This was a city called Mariupol," Vethorak explained. "The defending force was outnumbered 5-1. They had limited supplies, damaged equipment, and no hope of reinforcement. By every tactical calculation, They should have surrendered within the first week. And how long did they hold, Mevith asked. 86 days. The chamber fell quiet again, but this time there was no laughter. That is unexpected, admitted Counselor Thress, but surely such resistance is simply the result of desperation. Cornered animals often fight harder than they should. That is what I thought at first, Vethrak said, so I studied them more closely. I watched their other conflicts, read their history, analyzed their military doctrine. He shook his head slowly. These beings do not fight like cornered animals. They fight like something else entirely. He changed the display to show a different scene. This one depicted a single human soldier carrying another on his back, while enemy fire exploded around them. They call this concept "never leave a man behind." They will risk 10 lives to save one. They will expose themselves to certain death to retrieve the body of a fallen comrade. This makes no tactical sense. It wastes resources and endangers the mission. Then why do they do it? Asked a young aide from the Thessian delegation. Because they believe that their strength comes not from individuals, but from their bonds with each other. They fight harder knowing that their companions will never abandon them. A human soldier who believes his friends will come for him is more dangerous than 10 soldiers who fight alone. Representative Cole made a sound of dismissal. Primitive sentimentality. Such emotional weakness would be burned out of any species that faced real warfare. Would it? Vethrak's voice dropped low. Then explain this. The display changed again. This time it showed medical records and scientific data. Human bodies are remarkably fragile compared to most council species. Their bones break easily. Their skin tears without much pressure. They have no natural armor, no venom, no regenerative abilities worth mentioning. He paused. And yet they possess something that I have never seen in any other species we have studied, which is the ability to continue fighting long after their bodies should have failed. Vethrak pointed to the medical data. We documented cases of humans sustaining injuries that would kill or disable most beings, and yet they kept fighting, kept moving, kept protecting their companions. He showed them footage of a human soldier with a wound in his stomach, still firing his weapon at approaching enemies. Another clip showed a pilot whose arm hung useless at her side, somehow landing her damaged aircraft with one hand. Their medical researchers call it adrenaline response and pain suppression under stress. But those clinical terms do not capture what I witnessed. These beings have learned to ignore their own dying bodies through pure force of will. High Counselor Mevith studied the footage with narrowed eyes. Impressive, perhaps, for primitives. But one must ask, Commander, how this poses a threat to us. Even the most determined warrior cannot overcome superior technology. We have ships that could glass their entire planet from orbit. We have weapons that make their crude projectile devices look like children's toys. You are correct, High Counselor. Today, they pose no threat. Vethrak deactivated the display and looked around the chamber at each representative in turn. But humans advance quickly, very quickly. In less than 200 years, they went from riding animals to splitting atoms. In another 50, they reached their moon. They are now building stations in their own orbit and sending probes to neighboring worlds. All species advance, Counselor Thress said. The curve of technological development is well understood. Not like this. Vethrak shook his head. Humans advance during warfare faster than during peace. Conflict drives their innovation at a rate I have never seen recorded in any other species. Give them a century of exposure to galactic technology, and they will not just match us. They will surpass us. The laughter returned, louder this time. Commander, Mevith said, and there was pity in his voice now. I think we have heard enough. Your service to the Kithrani people and to this council has been long and honorable. But what you describe is fantasy. You are asking us to believe that a species of soft, short-lived creatures who cannot even escape their own gravity well will somehow threaten civilizations that have existed for hundreds of thousands of years. I am asking you to prepare, Vethrak said quietly. I am asking you to watch them, study them, and above all, I am asking you not to provoke them. Provoke them? Representative Cole laughed openly. What could we possibly do to a species so far beneath us? Vethrak looked at the Meridian representative with eyes that had seen too much death. You could underestimate them. That would be enough. High Counselor Mevith gestured to the guards at the chamber entrance. Thank you for your testimony, Commander. It will be logged and filed for future reference. Now, if there is nothing else, this council has more pressing matters to attend to. Vethrak allowed himself to be led from the speaking platform. As he walked toward the exit, he passed a young Kithrani aide who had been assigned to assist with his presentation. The boy looked at him with something like concern in his eyes. Commander, the aide whispered, do you really believe what you said in there? About the humans? Vethrak stopped and placed a scarred hand on the young one's shoulder. I have fought in 17 wars, boy. I have faced enemies that could crush mountains and adversaries that could poison entire worlds with a thought. None of them frightened me the way those humans did. Why? The old soldier was quiet for a long moment. Through the crystal windows, he could see the stars that had been his home for 4 decades. Somewhere out there, in a distant arm of the galaxy, a small blue world spun in the darkness. Its inhabitants had no idea that they had been observed, assessed, and dismissed as irrelevant. Because, Vethrak finally said, I looked into their eyes and I saw something that should not exist in creatures so fragile. I saw certainty, absolute, unshakable certainty that they would never give up, never surrender, never stop fighting as long as a single one of them drew breath. He resumed walking toward the exit. I hope I die before the council learns that I was right, he said over his shoulder, because when that day comes, boy, there will not be enough soldiers in the galaxy to stop what follows. The doors closed behind him, and the Galactic Council returned to its more pressing matters. They would not think about humans again for 18 months. By then, it would be far too late. The colony world of New Geneva hung in space like a blue and green jewel against the black velvet of the void. It was not a wealthy world. It was not a strategically important world. It was simply home to 400,000 humans who had left Earth 2 decades ago in search of a fresh start. Director Elena Vasquez stood at her office window and watched the morning sun rise over the capital city. She was a practical woman in her middle years, with gray streaking her dark hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights spent solving problems. She had been elected to lead the colony 5 years ago, and she had spent every day since then dealing with water shortages, crop failures, and the 1,000 small crises that came with building civilization from scratch. She had never expected to deal with an alien invasion. Director, they're broadcasting again. Vasquez turned to face her communications officer, a young man named Tomas, who looked like he had not slept in days. None of them had slept much since the ships appeared in orbit 3 days ago. Put it on screen, she said. The wall display flickered to life, showing the angular face of a Vrithani commander. His species was well documented in the limited alien contact files that Earth had accumulated over the past few decades. Tall, thin, with skin that shifted colors based on emotion, and 4-fingered hands that seemed to be in constant motion. The Vrithani were known as warriors and conquerors, members of the Galactic Council who had built their civilization on the bones of species they considered inferior. Human leader, the commander said in accented but understandable English. The translation systems the aliens used were remarkably effective. This is your final opportunity to accept our generous terms. Surrender your world peacefully, and your population will be relocated to designated labor zones with minimal casualties. Continue your foolish resistance, and we will be forced to demonstrate the consequences of defying the Vrithani dominion. Vasquez took a deep breath. Behind her, she could hear the quiet sounds of her staff working at their stations, coordinating the defense efforts that had consumed every waking hour since the fleet arrived. Commander, she said, keeping her voice steady, I have already explained our position. We are willing to negotiate. We are willing to discuss trade agreements, diplomatic relations, even territorial boundaries. But we will not surrender our homes and our freedom without discussion. The Vrithani's skin shifted to a darker shade that the briefing documents identified as contempt. There is nothing to discuss. You are primitives with crude technology and no allies. Your species has not even achieved proper interstellar travel. What could you possibly offer in negotiation? Peace, Vasquez said simply. We can offer you peace, or we can offer you something else entirely. You threaten us? The commander laughed, a harsh sound that did not translate well across species. Your entire defensive fleet consists of 12 patrol vessels that could not scratch the paint on our warships. You have no orbital weapons platforms, no planetary shields, no support coming from your homeworld. You are alone, human, and you are helpless. Then you have nothing to lose by talking. The commander's skin shifted again, this time to a shade that indicated impatience. I grow tired of these games. You have 1 hour to transmit your unconditional surrender. If we do not receive it, we will begin ground operations. He paused. My soldiers are eager to learn how humans fight. I expect they will be disappointed. The transmission ended. Vasquez stood in silence for a long moment, then turned to face her staff. They were all watching her, waiting for guidance, looking to her for strength that she was not sure she possessed. Get me Colonel Morrison, she said quietly. Tell him to begin implementing Defense Protocol 7. Tomas hesitated. Director, that protocol was designed for simulation exercises. It was never meant for actual use against a superior force. I know what it was designed for. Vasquez met his eyes. I also know that it's the only option we have left. We can't beat them with firepower, Tomas. We don't have the ships or the weapons, but maybe we can show them that taking this world will cost more than it's worth. She turned back to the window. The sky was beautiful this morning, pale blue with wisps of white cloud. Somewhere up there, 30 alien warships waited to deliver destruction. Maybe, she said softly, we can show them what humans are made of. The first Verthani landing craft touched down at 1400 hours local time. Colonel James Morrison watched from his concealed position on a hillside 3 kilometers away as the massive vessels settled onto the farmland outside the capital. Each craft carried roughly 200 soldiers and their equipment. 20 craft meant 4,000 enemy troops in the first wave alone. Morrison was a veteran of Earth's last major conflict, a border dispute in Southeast Asia that had cost him his left eye and earned him a chest full of medals he rarely wore. He had volunteered for the Colonial Defense Force because he believed in the mission of building new worlds, not because he expected to fight again. Life had a way of ignoring expectations. All units, this is Commander Actual, he said into his communication device. Hold your positions and wait for my signal. Do not engage until they are fully committed. Remember your training. Remember what we're fighting for. Around him, hidden in the rocks and brush and abandoned buildings of the outer districts, 600 human soldiers waited. They were not professional military for the most part. They were farmers and engineers and teachers who had picked up weapons when the aliens appeared. They were outgunned, out-armored, and outnumbered nearly 7-1 in this first engagement alone. Morrison smiled grimly. The Verthani had no idea what they were walking into. The alien troops moved with confidence as they fanned out from the landing craft. Their armor was sleek in advance, designed to deflect energy weapons and absorb kinetic impacts. Their weapons hummed with power that made the human rifles look like museum pieces. They communicated through implants that allowed instant coordination across their entire force. They had conquered 17 worlds. They had never lost a ground engagement. They had never fought humans. The first sign of trouble came when a Verthani scout squad entered what appeared to be an abandoned processing plant. The building had been evacuated 2 days earlier, its civilian workers relocated to underground shelters. What the scouts did not know was that it had been prepared with surprises. Morrison's communication device crackled. Team 7 in position, counting 12 hostiles entering the kill zone. Wait for full commitment, Morrison replied. Confirmed. They're all inside now. Execute! The explosion was not large by Verthani standards. Their warships could generate blasts 1,000 times more powerful, but it was precisely targeted, bringing down the support structure of the building in a way that trapped the scout squad under tons of rubble without killing them instantly. And then the humans emerged from the debris cloud, moving fast and low, finishing the survivors before they could call for help. 12 Verthani soldiers dead in the first 30 seconds of ground combat. The main force heard the explosion and began to advance toward the sound. This was expected. This was part of the plan. Morrison watched through his optical enhancement as the alien commander divided his troops, sending a significant force to investigate while maintaining a defensive perimeter around the landing craft. All teams, execute Phase 2. Across the city, in a dozen different locations, Similar scenes played out. Human soldiers, who had been invisible moments before, opened fire from unexpected positions, then vanished before the Vrithani could respond. Buildings that appeared empty turned out to be filled with traps. Streets that looked safe revealed hidden dangers. The aliens fought back with overwhelming force, pouring energy weapon fire into every possible hiding spot, calling in air support from their landing craft, coordinating their response through their communication implants. They killed humans. Of course they did. Their weapons were superior, their armor was better, and they had centuries of combat experience. But for every human they killed, they lost 3 of their own. And unlike the aliens, the humans did not stop fighting when they were wounded. They kept shooting until their weapons ran dry, then kept fighting with knives and rocks in bare hands. The Vrithani commander watched the casualty report scroll across his tactical display and felt something he had not experienced in over 50 conquests: doubt. "These creatures are insane," his second officer said, skin shifting to pale yellow with fear. "I watched one of them charge a fortified position with an explosive device strapped to his chest. He was already dead from multiple wounds. How was he still moving?" "Humans appear to possess unusual resistance to pain and trauma," the tactical officer reported. "Our weapons are not immediately lethal. They require multiple hits to achieve termination. Then increase fire concentration, assign 3 soldiers to each target." "Commander, that would reduce our effective fighting force significantly." "Do it." The battle lasted until nightfall. When the stars appeared over New Geneva, the Vrithani held the landing zone, and nothing else. They had expected to control the entire capital by now. Instead, they were digging in and calling for reinforcements. In his concealed command post, Morrison reviewed the day's results. 187 human casualties, including 43 dead. 612 confirmed Vrithani kills, with another 200 estimated from unconfirmed engagements. It was not a victory. They could not sustain those kinds of losses for long. And the aliens had 30 ships full of replacement troops, but it was something the Vrithani had never expected. It was resistance. "Sir," his communications officer said, "we're receiving a transmission from Director Vasquez." "Put her through." Vasquez's face appeared on the small screen, tired but determined. "Colonel, I need you to know that I've sent a message to Earth. It will take weeks to arrive, and longer for any response to reach us. But they will know what happened here." "Understood, Director." "I've also sent a copy of our tactical recordings from today's engagement." She paused. "If we fall, at least humanity will know how to fight these bastards." Morrison nodded slowly. "We won't fall, Director. Not today. Maybe not tomorrow. They're going to have to earn every block of this city in blood. And I intend to make sure it's mostly their blood, not ours." "I know you will, Colonel." She managed a small smile. "Give them hell." The transmission ended. Morrison turned back to his tactical map, already planning the next day's operations. The Vrithani would adapt. They would learn from their mistakes. They would bring heavier weapons and change their tactics. But so would the humans. That was what humans did. They learned, adapted, and survived against odds that should have been impossible. Somewhere in the depths of space, a lightspeed message raced toward Galactic Council headquarters. It was a report from the Vrithani commander requesting reinforcements and expressing concerns about the unexpected difficulty of the campaign. Counselor Mevith received the report during his morning briefing cycle. He read it twice, then quietly requested that Vethrak's sealed testimony be retrieved from the archives. The old soldier's warning echoed in his mind as he looked at the casualty figures. Maybe, Mevith thought, they should have listened. The retirement community on Kithra Prime was built for soldiers who had given everything to their people. The buildings were low and comfortable, surrounded by gardens that bloomed with flowers from a dozen different worlds. The air smelled of peace and rest, 2 things that Vethrak had not known for most of his life. He was sitting in his small room, reading an old tactical manual from his training days, when the message arrived. The official seal of the Galactic Council glowed on the communication screen, and beneath it was a summons that left no room for refusal. "So," he said quietly to himself, "they finally learned." 3 days later, Vethrak stood once again in the great chamber of the Galactic Council. The room looked the same as it had 18 months ago, but everything else had changed. The representatives who had laughed at his testimony now watched him with expressions that ranged from fear to desperate hope. High Counselor Meveth descended from his elevated seat and approached the speaking platform. This was unprecedented. Counselors did not leave their positions during formal sessions. Commander Vethrak, Meveth said, and there was no arrogance in his voice now. We owe you an apology. With respect, High Counselor, you do not owe me anything. Vethrak kept his voice steady. You owe an explanation to the families of the Vrithani soldiers who died on New Geneva. You owe answers to the other council species who trusted your judgment when you dismissed my warnings. Meveth's pale blue skin darkened with shame. You are correct. We failed in our duty to take all potential threats seriously. He gestured to the display screens that lined the chamber walls. We have called you here because we need your expertise. We need to understand what we are facing. The screens flickered to life, showing footage from New Geneva. Vethrak watched in silence as the recordings played out. Scene after scene of combat between Vrithani soldiers and human defenders. He saw a human woman with a medical symbol on her arm running into enemy fire to reach a wounded comrade. Energy bolts struck the ground around her, but she did not slow down, did not hesitate. She reached the injured soldier, lifted him onto her shoulders despite being half his size, and carried him back to cover while returning fire with her sidearm. He saw a group of human farmers armed with nothing more than hunting weapons and improvised explosives, ambush a Vrithani patrol in a narrow canyon. The aliens had superior firepower, but the humans knew the terrain. They moved through the rocks like ghosts, striking and vanishing before the enemy could respond. He saw a young human man, barely more than a child, stand his ground against an advancing Vrithani squad, while civilian transports evacuated behind him. He was hit 3 times before he fell, and even then he kept firing until his weapon ran dry. In 60 days of combat, Counselor Thress said quietly, the Vrithani have suffered over 12,000 casualties. They have called for reinforcements 4 times. They control less than 30% of the planetary surface. Against how many defenders? Vethrak asked. Initial human forces numbered approximately 600 trained soldiers and 2,000 volunteer militia. Thress paused. Those numbers have since increased. It appears that every human capable of holding a weapon has joined the defense. Representative Cole of the Meridian Syndicate spoke up, his voice lacking the dismissive tone he had used in their last meeting. We have analyzed their tactics. They make no sense by conventional standards. They sacrifice advantageous positions to rescue wounded. They use resources on hopeless defensive actions. They refuse to retreat even when retreat would be the logical choice. That is because you are applying your standards to beings who do not share them. Vethrak said, humans do not fight to win. They fight to survive. And more importantly, they fight to ensure that others survive. Their loyalty to each other is not a weakness. It is the source of their strength. High Counselor Meveth leaned forward. Then how do we defeat them? Vethrak was quiet for a long moment. Around him the council waited, desperate for the answer that would solve their problem and restore their sense of superiority. You don't, he finally said. Uproar filled the chamber. Representatives shouted objections. Aides scrambled to calm their superiors. Meveth raised his hands for silence, but it took several minutes before order was restored. Explain, the High Counselor demanded. What do you know about human history? Vethrak asked. Very little. They are a young species with a short recorded past. Then allow me to educate you. Vethrak activated his own data device and sent information to the display screens. Humans have been fighting wars for as long as they have existed as a species. They have developed hundreds of different combat doctrines, thousands of tactical innovations, millions of individual acts of courage and sacrifice. War is not something they do occasionally. It is part of who they are. The screen showed human history, ancient battles fought with swords and spears, massive conflicts spanning entire continents, wars that lasted decades and killed millions. And through all of it, humans kept fighting, kept adapting, kept refusing to surrender. But here is the most important thing, Vethrak continued. Humans advance fastest when they are at war. They develop new technologies under pressure that would take other species centuries to create. They innovate, improvise, and overcome obstacles that should be impossible. He changed the display to show technological development curves. In peacetime, humans advance at a rate comparable to most council species. But during major conflicts, their rate of advancement increases by a factor of 10, sometimes more. Counselor Thress studied the data with growing concern. You are suggesting that by attacking them, we have accelerated their development? I am saying that you have given them a reason to focus all of their considerable creativity on the art of war. Vethrak shook his head slowly. The Verthani brought warships with technology centuries ahead of anything humans possess. How long do you think it will take human scientists to study captured equipment and reverse engineer it? How long before they start improving on what they learn? The chamber fell silent. I watched them on Earth, Vethrak said quietly. I saw soldiers who continued fighting with wounds that would have killed most beings. I saw medics who ignored enemy fire to treat anyone who needed help, including enemy wounded. I saw commanders who stayed on the front lines with their troops instead of directing from safety. He paused. But do you know what frightened me most? What? Meveth asked. I saw them help each other without being ordered to, without expecting reward, without hesitation. Vethrak met the High Counselor's eyes. Humans have something that we have never encountered in any other species. They call it many things. Duty, honor, brotherhood, love. Whatever name they use, it makes them stronger than individuals should be. A human fighting alone is dangerous. A human fighting for their family, their friends, their home, that is something else entirely. He gestured at the footage still playing on the screens. Look at them. Really look. Those are not soldiers following orders. Those are beings who would rather die than abandon each other. How do you defeat an enemy who is not afraid of death? Representative Cole stirred. We have overwhelming force. We can bring hundreds of ships, millions of soldiers. And they will fight you for every meter of ground, Vethrak interrupted. They will make you pay for every city, every village, every hill and valley. And even if you win, even if you kill every human on New Geneva, do you know what will happen? What? Earth will find out, and then 12 billion humans will know that the galaxy wants them dead. Vethrak let that number hang in the air. 12 billion beings who fight like demons and advance faster under pressure. 12 billion beings who will unite against a common enemy with a hatred that burns like the heart of a star. The chamber was absolutely silent now. You asked me how to defeat them, Vethrak said. I told you the truth. You can't. Not without paying a price so high that victory becomes meaningless. He straightened his old shoulders, ignoring the pain from decades of accumulated wounds. But there is another option, which is stop fighting them, withdraw from New Geneva, open diplomatic channels. Vethrak allowed himself a grim smile. Make them your allies instead of your enemies. Allies? Counselor Thress sounded genuinely shocked. After what we have done to them, humans have a remarkable capacity for forgiveness, not because they are weak, but because they understand that holding on to hatred only breeds more conflict. Vethrak thought of the footage he had watched, the medics treating wounded enemies, the soldiers who accepted surrenders instead of taking revenge. They could have killed every Verthani prisoner on New Geneva. They didn't. They could have tortured captured soldiers for information. They didn't. Even now, while fighting for their lives, they are treating their enemies with more honor than those enemies deserve. High Counselor Meveth was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with the weight of his decision. The Council will need to discuss this, he said, but I believe you may be right, Commander. We have made a terrible mistake, and continuing on this path will only make it worse. He paused. However, there are those who will not accept this. Fleet Admiral Korath has already assembled a response fleet. He intends to make an example of the humans. Vethrak felt a chill run through his old bones. How large a fleet? 400 ships from 9 species. 2 million soldiers. Call it back. Korath does not answer to this council in military matters. He has authorization from the Verthani High Command to conduct operations as he sees fit. Meveth's expression was grim. I fear we have set something in motion that cannot be stopped. Vethrak closed his eyes. In his mind, he saw the human soldiers from the footage. their faces set with determination, their eyes filled with that strange fire that no other species possessed. "Then may the gods of your worlds have mercy on Korath," he said quietly, "because the humans will not." He left the council chamber knowing that his warnings had finally been heard, but also knowing that it might already be too late. Somewhere in the depths of space, 400 warships raced toward human territory, carrying death and destruction and the absolute certainty of victory. They had no idea what was waiting for them. Fleet Admiral Korath stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Verthani dreadnought Unconquerable, and watched the stars slip past as his armada traveled through faster-than-light space. 400 warships from 9 different council species, carrying 2 million soldiers and enough firepower to glass entire worlds. It was the largest military force assembled in 3 centuries, and it was all aimed at a single species that could not even travel faster than light. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "we will exit FTL space at the edge of the human system in approximately 6 hours." "Excellent." Korath's skin shifted to deep red with satisfaction. "Signal all ship commanders. I want full battle readiness when we arrive. The humans have embarrassed the Verthani Dominion long enough. We will crush them so completely that no primitive species will ever dare resist council authority again." "Yes, Admiral." Korath turned to stare at the view screen, imagining the destruction to come. He had heard the reports from New Geneva, of course. He knew about the casualties, the unexpected resistance, the strange determination of the human defenders. He dismissed most of it as excuses from incompetent commanders who had underestimated their opponents. He would not make the same mistake. He would use overwhelming force from the start, destroying every human vessel and installation before they could organize a defense. By the time his ground forces landed, there would be nothing left to resist. The humans would learn what happened to those who defied the Verthani Dominion. 6 hours later, the Armada dropped out of FTL space at the edge of the Sol system. Korath watched the tactical display as his ships took up formation. A wall of weapons and armor that no force in the known galaxy could hope to challenge. "Scan for enemy vessels," he ordered. "Admiral, I'm detecting 1 contact." The tactical officer sounded confused. "A single ship, approximately 3 kilometers from our current position." "1 ship?" "Yes, Admiral. It appears to be a cruiser-class vessel of unknown design." Korath laughed. The sound echoed through the command deck, and several of his officers joined in nervously. "They send 1 ship to face 400? These primitives are even more foolish than I thought." "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the human vessel. Put it on screen." The view screen flickered, and Korath found himself looking at a human woman in a crisp naval uniform. She appeared to be middle-aged, with dark skin and gray-streaked hair cut short in a military style. Her eyes were calm and steady, showing no fear at all despite facing an armada that could destroy her ship 1,000 times over. "This is Admiral Helena Okonkwo of the United Nations Navy," she said. "I am addressing the commander of the Galactic Council Fleet. You have entered human-controlled space without authorization. I am ordering you to reverse course and withdraw immediately." Korath stared at the screen in disbelief. "You are ordering us? You command 1 ship, human. I command 400. What could you possibly threaten us with?" "Consequences," Okonkwo replied simply. "Turn back now, and there will be peace between our peoples. Continue your advance, and you will discover why that would be a mistake." "I think I will take my chances." Korath made a dismissive gesture. "You have 1 opportunity to surrender. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. If you resist, you will be destroyed." Okonkwo smiled slightly. It was not the smile of someone afraid. It was the smile of someone who knew something that Korath did not. "We will resist," she said. "We will always resist." The transmission ended. Korath shook his head in disgust. "All ships, advance in formation. Destroy that vessel and any others that try to impede our progress." The Armada began to move forward, a tide of metal and energy that should have been unstoppable. Korath watched the lone human ship on his tactical display, expecting it to flee or attempt some desperate attack. Instead, it held position. And then behind it, 46 more contacts appeared. "Admiral, additional human vessels detected. They appear to have been powered down, hiding behind sensor-blocking debris fields." 47 ships against 400? Korra snorted. They are still hopelessly outmatched. Continue the advance. The battle began at 1400 hours, standard galactic time. Korath expected it to be over quickly. His ships opened fire with weapons that could tear through planetary crusts, energy beams and kinetic projectiles that had destroyed countless enemies over centuries of warfare. The human vessels were smaller, less armored, equipped with technology that should have been decades behind Council standards. But the humans did not fight like any enemy Korath had ever faced. Their ships moved in patterns that made no tactical sense, weaving through formations and targeting specific systems on Council vessels rather than trying to destroy them outright. They took hits that should have been crippling and kept fighting, their damaged vessels continuing to maneuver and fire even when they should have been dead in space. And then one of the human ships did something that Korath had never seen in 300 years of warfare. It accelerated directly toward a Verthani destroyer, taking fire from multiple sources and rammed into the enemy vessel at full speed. Both ships exploded in a ball of plasma and debris. What? What was that? Korath's tactical officer stammered. That pilot deliberately destroyed his own ship. That's impossible. No rational being would... Before Korath could finish his sentence, another human vessel made the same maneuver, ramming a Meridian cruiser and taking it out of the fight permanently. Then another, and another. Admiral, we're receiving damage reports from across the fleet. The humans are targeting command vessels and weapon systems with precision strikes. They're not trying to destroy our ships. They're trying to cripple them. Korath watched his beautiful armada begin to fall apart. The humans were losing ships, certainly. They were taking casualties that would have forced any other species to retreat. But they kept coming, kept fighting, kept sacrificing themselves in ways that defied every principle of rational warfare. He saw a human fighter craft, barely larger than a shuttle, fly directly into the main gun battery of a Council battleship. The pilot must have known he would die. He did it anyway. He saw boarding pods launched from human cruisers, attaching to Council vessels and disgorging soldiers who fought hand-to-hand in corridors designed for species twice their size. The humans should have been slaughtered. Instead, they used their smaller size to their advantage, moving through maintenance ducts and creating chaos throughout the ships they invaded. He saw human medical ships, clearly marked with symbols of healing, diving into the middle of combat zones to recover damaged vessels and wounded crew. They took fire from Council ships that did not recognize the symbols, and they kept working anyway. 4 hours into the battle, Korath received a report that changed everything. Admiral, we've lost 217 ships. Another 143 are too damaged to continue fighting. Our ground forces have taken over 40% casualties from human boarding actions. Korath stared at the numbers. In 4 hours, he had lost more than half his fleet to an enemy that should have been destroyed in minutes. Admiral, his communications officer said, we're receiving a transmission from the human flagship. Put it through. Admiral Okonkwo appeared on screen again. Her face was tired now, marked with the strain of command during desperate combat. Behind her, Korath could see damaged consoles and officers working frantically to keep her ship functioning. Fleet Admiral Korath, she said, I am offering you one chance to surrender. Power down your weapons and withdraw your remaining forces. We will provide safe passage for your surviving ships to return to Council space. You're offering us surrender terms? Korath could not believe what he was hearing. You've lost more than half your vessels. You're outnumbered and outgunned. We know, Okonkwo nodded slowly, but we will continue fighting until every human ship is destroyed and every human soldier is dead. And even then, the vessels you have left won't be enough to conquer Earth. She paused. You've seen how we fight, Admiral. You know I'm telling the truth. We don't surrender. We don't give up. We will make you pay for every centimeter of space and blood. Korath looked at his tactical display. The human fleet had been reduced to 18 operational vessels. His own forces still numbered over 100 functioning ships, with more that could be repaired. By any objective measure, he was winning. But the humans had taught him something in these 4 hours. They had shown him that objective measures meant nothing against beings who would sacrifice everything for each other. They had demonstrated that technological superiority was meaningless against enemies who used their own ships as weapons. And they had proven that even in defeat, they could inflict losses that made victory feel like failure. "Why are you doing this?" Korath asked, and for the first time his voice held no contempt. "Why fight when you cannot win?" "Because there's no other choice," Okonkwo replied. "If we surrender, our people become slaves. If we die fighting, at least we die free. And maybe, just maybe, we take enough of you with us that the next species you threaten will have a chance." She leaned forward slightly, and Korath saw something in her eyes that he had never seen in any enemy before. It was not hatred, it was not fear, it was simply certainty. "We're not fighting to win, Admiral. We're fighting to protect. There are children on Earth who have never seen a Verthani ship. There are families who are living their normal lives right now, unaware that we're dying out here to keep them safe. That's what we're fighting for, and that's why we'll never stop." The transmission ended. Korath stood in silence on his damaged command deck. Around him, officers waited for orders. The battle was effectively over. He could destroy the remaining human ships without much difficulty. He could continue to Earth and complete his mission. But the cost, the terrible, unimaginable cost. "Signal the fleet," he said finally. "All vessels are to power down weapons and prepare for withdrawal." "Admiral?" His tactical officer looked stunned. "We can still win. We have superior numbers." "We have numbers," Korath interrupted. "They have something else, and I do not have enough soldiers in this fleet to learn what that something else truly means." He turned away from the view screen. "We're going home." 4 hours later, the surviving Council ships began their FTL journey back to Galactic Council space. Behind them, the human fleet held position, battered and broken, but undefeated. Admiral Okonkwo watched them go from the bridge of her crippled flagship. "Ma'am," her communications officer said, "Fleet Admiral Korath is requesting a private channel." "Put him through." Korath's face appeared on her personal screen. He looked older than he had at the start of the battle, as if the past 4 hours had aged him decades. "Why did you let us go?" he asked. "You could have pursued us, destroyed more of our ships while we were disorganized." Okonkwo considered the question carefully before answering. "Because we don't fight to destroy, Admiral. We fight to protect. And now that you're leaving, there's nothing more to protect against. You killed thousands of my soldiers today, and you killed thousands of ours. But the killing is over now, if you choose to let it be." Korath was quiet for a long moment. "I have been a warrior for 300 years, human. I have conquered worlds and destroyed enemies without number. But I have never faced anything like you." He paused. "I don't understand how being so fragile can fight so hard." "We're not fragile, Admiral." Okonkwo smiled slightly. "We just look that way." The transmission ended, and Okonkwo watched the last Council ships vanish into faster-than-light space. Around her, the surviving human vessels began the long work of rescue and repair. Medical ships moved among the debris fields, searching for survivors on both sides. Engineers assessed damage and made plans for rebuilding. It was not a victory in any traditional sense. They had lost too many ships, too many lives, too much. But they had done what humans always did. They had survived. The great chamber of the Galactic Council had never been so quiet. Representatives from 12 species sat in their designated sections. But the usual murmur of side conversations and political maneuvering was absent. The air itself seemed heavy, weighted down by the news that had spread through Council space like fire through dry grass. The Armada had been defeated, 400 ships sent to crush a primitive species, and fewer than half had returned. 2 million soldiers reduced to scattered survivors with haunted eyes and stories that no one wanted to believe. High Counselor Meveth stood at his elevated position and looked down at the assembly. His pale blue skin was gray with exhaustion, and his 4 eyes showed the strain of sleepless days spent managing a crisis that threatened to unravel the Council itself. "This session is called to order," he announced. "We are here to receive the formal communication from the human government and to discuss our response." Before he could continue, the chamber doors opened and a human walked in. Ambassador James Adeyemi was tall for his species, with dark skin and a calm expression that revealed nothing of what he might be feeling. He wore simple clothing in the formal style of Earth diplomacy, without ornament or decoration. Two human guards accompanied him, but they remained at the entrance as the ambassador approached the speaking platform alone. Mevith had met many ambassadors in his long career. Most displayed nervousness when facing the council for the first time. Others showed arrogance, trying to project strength they did not possess. This human showed neither. He simply looked around the chamber with quiet interest, as if he were visiting a museum rather than addressing the most powerful governing body in the known galaxy. Ambassador Adeyemi, Mevith said, you requested this audience. The council has agreed to hear your proposal. Thank you, High Counselor. Adeyemi's voice was measured and pleasant. Before I begin, I want to express my government's sincere condolences for the lives lost in the recent conflict. War is a terrible thing, and we take no pleasure in the suffering it has caused on both sides. A ripple of surprise moved through the chamber. This was not how defeated species spoke, and it was certainly not how victorious ones did either. Condolences! Representative Cole of the Meridian Syndicate stood, his voice sharp with anger. You destroyed over 200 of our ships. You killed tens of thousands of our soldiers. And you offer condolences? We do, Adeyemi replied calmly, because every one of those soldiers was someone's child, someone's friend, someone's beloved. We understand that. We grieve for your losses just as we grieve for our own. Cole seemed unsure how to respond to this. He slowly sat back down. Ambassador, Counselor Thress spoke up, surely you understand our confusion. You have defeated the largest military force assembled in 3 centuries. By all rights of conquest, you could demand territory, reparations, even subjugation of the species that attacked you. Why have you requested a diplomatic meeting instead? Adeyemi smiled slightly. Because conquest is not why humans fight, Counselor. We fight to protect. Now that the threat has ended, there is nothing left to fight against. He spread his hands in a gesture of openness. We have come to offer peace. Peace? High Counselor Mevith leaned forward. What terms do you propose? Simple ones. Adeyemi pulled a small data device from his pocket and activated it. A holographic display appeared above the speaking platform, showing a document in multiple languages. We propose a formal end to hostilities. We propose the establishment of diplomatic relations between the human government and the Galactic Council. We propose trade agreements that will benefit both our peoples. He paused, letting the Council absorb this information. We also propose a mutual defense treaty. If any Council member is attacked by an outside force, humanity will stand with you. And if humanity is threatened, we ask for your support in return. The chamber erupted into chaos. Representatives shouted questions and objections. Aides scrambled to analyze the implications. Even the normally composed High Counselor looked stunned. You want alliance? Mevith finally managed to ask. Yes. After we invaded your colony? After we tried to exterminate your species? Yes. Representative Cole rose again, his face twisted with confusion. This makes no sense. You hold the advantage. You have demonstrated military capabilities that we clearly underestimated. Why would you offer partnership instead of demanding surrender? Adeyemi turned to face the Meridian representative directly. May I tell you a story, Representative? Cole made a dismissive gesture, but did not object. About 400 years ago on Earth, Adeyemi began, there was a great war. One nation had conquered much of the continent and seemed unstoppable. The other nations eventually united against them, and after years of terrible fighting, they won. He paused. The victors had every right to destroy the defeated nation completely, to take its territory, enslave its people, and ensure it could never threaten them again. That is what empires had always done throughout human history. Instead, they chose a different path. They helped rebuild the nation they had defeated. They offered trade and partnership. They worked to create a world where former enemies could become friends. The result was not perfect. Nothing ever is, but it led to the longest period of peace that region had ever known. Former enemies became allies. Old hatreds slowly faded. Children grew up in a world where war between those nations seemed unthinkable. Adeyemi turned back to address the full council. That is the world humans want to build, not just on Earth, but among the stars. We know that conquest only breeds resentment, and resentment eventually becomes rebellion. Empires built on force always fall, sooner or later. But partnerships built on mutual respect can last forever. The chamber was quiet now, absorbing the ambassador's words. High Counselor Meveth spoke slowly, choosing his words with care. Ambassador, you speak of respect, but how can there be respect between our peoples after what has happened? The Vrithani invaded your world. The Council dismissed warnings about your species and allowed an armada to be sent against you. How can you forgive such things? Adiemi met his eyes. Because forgiveness is not weakness, High Counselor. It is strength. He stepped closer to Meveth's platform. Every human soldier who died defending New Geneva knew what they were fighting for. They were fighting for a future where their children would not have to fear invasion, where their grandchildren might travel freely among the stars, where humanity and the Council species could work together to build something greater than either could achieve alone. That future requires forgiveness. It requires letting go of anger and choosing hope instead. It requires believing that beings who have done terrible things can learn to do better. His voice softened. My grandmother was a refugee from a war on Earth. Her family lost everything to enemies who showed no mercy. And yet she spent her life building bridges between former enemies. She believed that people could change, that even the deepest wounds could heal, given time and will. She was right, and I choose to believe that the same is true for species as well as individuals. High Counselor Meveth was silent for a long moment. Then he descended from his elevated seat once more, walking across the chamber floor to stand face to face with the human ambassador. You truly believe we can move past this? I believe we must try. Meveth extended one pale hand in the gesture of greeting that humans had adopted across their interactions with alien species. Adeyemi took it without hesitation. Then let us try together, Meveth said. The treaty was signed 3 days later, after intense negotiation and debate. Not all Council species agreed to all terms. Some refused to participate at all, their pride too wounded to accept partnership with beings they had dismissed as primitives. But enough agreed. Enough chose hope over resentment. Enough decided that the future was more important than the past. As the last signatures were recorded, a small ceremony was held in a private chamber adjacent to the main hall. Only a few beings attended: High Counselor Meveth, Ambassador Adeyemi, Counselor Thress, and one other. Commander Vethrak stood in the corner, watching as history changed its course. You were right, Commander, Meveth said, approaching the old soldier. About everything. We should have listened. Vethrak shook his head slowly. I warned you about human combat capabilities. I never could have predicted this. He gestured toward the treaty documents. I expected them to demand revenge, to use their victory as a weapon. That is what any species I have ever encountered would have done. His voice dropped low. That is what I would have done. Adeyemi overheard the comment and walked over to join them. May I ask you something, Commander? Of course. When you observed humanity on Earth, what frightened you most? What made you feel we were a threat? Vethrak considered the question carefully before answering. Your determination, your absolute refusal to surrender, even when surrender would have been the rational choice. I had never seen beings fight like that. I thought so, Adeyemi nodded. But you missed something important. What? The same determination that makes us dangerous in war makes us powerful in peace. When humans commit to something, we don't give up. Whether that something is defending our homes or building friendships with former enemies, he smiled. You saw our capacity for war. Now you'll see our capacity for loyalty. Vethrak studied the human ambassador with eyes that had seen too much violence and too little hope. For decades, he had believed that the galaxy was a place of endless conflict, where strength alone determined survival. Perhaps he had been wrong. Ambassador, he said, may I ask you a question in return? Of course. How do humans show such restraint after being attacked? How can you offer friendship to those who tried to destroy you? Adeyemi was quiet for a moment, considering the question seriously. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. Because true strength has never been about what you can destroy, Commander. It's about what you choose to build instead. He extended his hand toward Vethrak in the same gesture of greeting he had offered Meveth. Would you like to help us build something new? Vethrak looked at the extended hand. In his mind, he saw the footage from Earth that had frightened him so long ago. He saw the battles on New Geneva. He saw the Armada's defeat and the mercy shown to survivors who had come to conquer. Slowly, he reached out and took the human's hand. Yes, the old soldier said. I believe I would. Outside the chamber, the stars continued their eternal dance through the darkness. Somewhere among them, on a small blue world orbiting a yellow sun, billions of humans went about their daily lives, unaware that everything had changed. The galaxy had learned something new about humanity that day. Not just about their ferocity in battle, but about their capacity for forgiveness. Not just about their refusal to surrender, but about their determination to build bridges instead of walls. And in the great chamber of the Galactic Council, history recorded a treaty that would shape the future of countless worlds. It was just the beginning.